Hi, everyone. This is Nikki from Illuminated Movement Astrology, here today to talk about the planet Saturn and his transition from Pisces to the sign of Aries. So I talked in a previous video about the elements. I won't be going over that as much today, but if you want to check out more about what the elements mean and the other outer planet transits, which are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, I'll have that linked below. But in this video, what I want to do is talk about the planet Saturn itself, talk about Pisces and Saturn and what we have been learning. What was the invitation for us to grow through and go through? And then how that transitions to Aries. And again, offer some reflection so that you can think about how to use this energy or how to tap into it for your own personal growth and self-actualization. So let's get started. Okay, so as I mentioned in most of my videos, I work with astrology through a particular lens. So I look at astrology through the humanistic and evolutionary lenses, which have to do with your own personal growth and your own self-actualization. There's a lot of different ways to look at astrology. I know many people are really into predictive astrology or traditional astrology, things of that nature. But this is the way that I look at it. So if you're looking for a video that's going to talk about maybe the political landscape or things like that, I'm not your astrologer. I'm focused on how to help this astrology help you. Okay. So just briefly going over, I know this is not the prettiest graphic, but I did put it in my last video as well. And I think it helps, helps me visualize certainly what the energy has really been like when we're talking about the last several years. So when we talk about the planet Saturn, we're talking about one of the planets that really does affect society and also our place in society. So that's going to be really relevant when we're talking about all these big changes coming up and what they feel like and why everything feels like this really big, huge bam of a change. Sometimes the changes feel more subtle and sometimes they feel like you just get hit with them hard, right? So we're kind of in one of those hit with them hard phases because all of the outer planets will be shifting. There's some retrograding going on, but they're shifting or have shifted into air and fire from water and earth. And that's a really, really, really big fundamental change of energy. We went from an internalized, receptive, reflective, more feminine time into a much more externalized, fast-paced, masculine, expressive time. And that's going to be coming up, and that's going to continue for the next several years. So taking a look at the planet Saturn. So Saturn spends about 2.25 signs per year. It can vary between 2 to 3, and it has approximately a 29-year orbit, what we call the Saturn return, right? So most people have heard of that term. It's when Saturn goes from its starting point on your natal chart all the way around back to where it started. And that occurs in our late 20s, early 30s, depending on the sign we have Saturn in our natal chart. So that's a really big period of time. Now, if you continue on in life, you'll get a second Saturn return somewhere in your late 50s, early 60s, and possibly even a third. So there's these big turning points in our lives of when we are kind of going back and looking at what have we grown through, what did we go through, and how has it shaped us, and what can we do with it? Okay, so Saturn is associated with a lot of things. I love to associate Saturn as the great teacher, right? The mentor and the coach, the one that helps you by giving you the hard work to do. Okay, it helps you by giving you tasks, maybe not letting you jump off of the high dive before you even know how to get in the water, right? It's kind of one of those things that says, let's pump the brakes a bit. Saturn is also associated with structure and wisdom. And I pulled out, I love words and the etymology of words, but I only pulled out the Cambridge Dictionary definitions because I think it helps give some understanding of what Saturn's trying to do for us. So as a noun, a structure is the way in which parts of a system or object are arranged or organized, or a system arranged in this way. Structure as a verb can be to plan, organize, or arrange the parts of something. Okay. When we talk about structure with Saturn, also, we're talking about our physical body. Saturn is our bones, which without a skeleton, we wouldn't have a structure for the other things on our body. right? Kind of fascinating there. When we look at the wisdom part, wisdom is a noun, right? And that has a couple of definitions also. One, the ability to use your knowledge and experience to make good decisions and judgments. Or two, the ability to make good judgments based on what you have learned from your experience or the knowledge and understanding that gives you this ability. And so just keep that in mind when we're talking about Saturn and when you're reflecting on Saturn in your own life and your own chart. I think it really helps ameliorate some of the less awesome sides of Saturn, which we're about to get to. So some keywords here. I put the challenges first on purpose because Saturn, we tend to see the challenges and the hardship part first before we get the benefits. Okay, it starts out as the hard thing, you do the action, you interact with it, and then you get, right? Saturn kind of says, not right now, later. It's part of why it's associated with wisdom, right? We don't really get wisdom until we've had a lot of life experience. Various things have come and gone. We've had other people, opinions, we've learned, we've changed, we've figured out, what we know and don't know, and hopefully are still humble to open ourselves up to learning more or having new viewpoints given to us. So looking at some of the challenging sides of Saturn, it represents authority, but in a challenging way, it could be something or someone that is authoritative, very restrictive, right? Or it could indicate conflicts with authority, okay? We're talking about burdens, and we're talking about more burdens that are so immense, it feels like drudgery. Like we're overly laden with things and we just are barely pulling ourselves through, right? That can really be a Saturn type of feeling. Saturn is also associated with bitterness, right? And resentment. So if we're taking some of that wisdom, Saturn is the elder in all of us as well. How many people do you know who we have a few, years around the sun who have gotten really bitter or resentful? Life didn't turn out the way they wanted, or everything is always wrong, or they're very cynical, or things in that nature. When we feel overly burdened, right, or we don't have good structures or boundaries in our lives, that can also happen. We can feel burnt out because we've been overly giving, and that can make us feel bitter or resentful too. So there's a lot of ways in which that can show up. Saturn, as we already talked about, talks about obstacles and delays. It's putting something in your path to say, all right, how do you deal with this, right? Or we need a little bit more time for that to mature. That's why Saturn is associated with both time and maturity. If we were to look at a plant from a seed to, let's say, a lemon tree, it's not going to happen in 1 hour. It's going to take time for that to occur, for the plant to fully grow, blossom, and mature into bearing fruit. Okay. Discipline. So discipline, having a couple different definitions. On the challenging side, I would say discipline as in the form of punishment. Like you will be disciplined, or there will be disciplinary action taken against you, right? And that goes along with conflicts with authority as well, right? Misuse of authority, really. Talking about fear. So Saturn has to do with what we are afraid of. In our natal chart, it will be something that we work on throughout our life. So it's where we feel we lack, maybe we feel we're not good enough, or we feel maybe stupid, or we don't want to fail. Those kinds of things will be represented by Saturn in our natal chart. As it's transiting, Saturn will represent that in an area of our chart, a slice of life for a small amount of time. When it's in our natal chart, it's part of our lifelong story, okay? And everyone has Saturn somewhere, so everyone has challenges somewhere, okay? We're talking again about the Grim Reaper, right? Saturn at a certain period, especially before Pluto was given a planet, planetary status, I guess, in the 1930s, Saturn was the planet of death, right? It was the pattern of endings. So Saturn can also indicate where things have come to a spot where they can no longer go forward. Okay. Saturn, isolation and separation. This has definitely been a big theme since 2020, when we've seen Saturn get increasingly more juice behind it as it was moving through Capricorn and then Aquarius, and then been going through Pisces, not quite as much, but we already were really separated, right? We have been in effect isolated from things. And that can be on the challenging side, something that maybe you're not choosing. Right? Like all of a sudden your job ends and now you don't have friends and coworkers anymore. Maybe people have moved away, or maybe they've moved on literally, or shuffled off this mortal coil as well. They could just no longer be physically alive. That can give us a sense of being alone, right? In a way that feels heavy, because Saturn represents the element of lead. So it can feel like this laden, heavy thing that we don't necessarily want to be experiencing. And that's very different than separation or isolation that's chosen, right? It also represents melancholy and depression, right? If you feel heavy, you feel overly burdened, bitter, isolated from things that were giving you joy, not going to feel so great, right? That can be a really, really challenging piece of Saturn, is being able to move past some of those feelings, some of those temporary states of being. And then again, as I've talked about, Saturn also represents lack or an inhibition. So if we have Saturn in, let's say, the third house, or Saturn in Gemini, we might have a fear of speaking up, or a fear of looking unintelligent, or we may feel this inhibition around writing or sharing our thoughts, for example. So it's one way that can show up. When we're talking about the benefits, when we actively choose to work with Saturn and we actively choose to engage with the challenges that it's bringing to us in its particular sign and house and placement in our chart, then we get to, like that tree, get the benefits, right? We get to get the benefits of maturity and getting comfortable with having an inner authority, right? If we think about the development of children, and of course, some of this is changing a little bit now, but a child, an infant, is very dependent, right? The parents or the caregivers are the authority. They are the thing that is creating, in a sense, like the whole world. Survival is dependent on that. But at a certain point, as we start to grow, we develop, we get more of the world, we meet other people, we fall down and get up, and all those kinds of things. We start to realize that, oh, hey, I have to make choices for myself too, right? And if we've had an upbringing that supports that, that really helps us to develop our inner authority and say, I can make good choices, right? Remember wisdom. I can structure my life. I can do those kinds of things, which gives me confidence to help me work on the places where maybe I do feel stuck, or I feel like I lack, or I'm coming up against obstacles, right? When that's something that we haven't had growing up in our family system for whatever reason, when we don't get a caregiver experience where we are allowed to grow and develop into our own person, maybe we had a parent or caregiver that was very controlling, very authoritative, didn't let us have friends or choose what we wanted to wear to events, or really dictated our life path and said, nope, you're going to choose this life path because it's what I want for you, or you can't make those kinds of decisions for yourself. You have to listen to me, or you have to do what someone else says. And that becomes pervasive. This is not something that happens like on a one-off or an appropriate space, but this is the condition that is happening pervasively and repeatedly. We grow up without a sense of strong inner authority. And that can be represented also by Saturn in your chart in specific areas and specific places where that may have been your experience. And so one of the things you have to grow into is finding out who you are and how you want to be. What works for you? What life path do you want to do? What do you believe in? Who are you? Right? And that can be a really difficult part of the maturation process, okay, for some people. Some people it's easier, it just depends. But that's part of what we're cultivating there in general. And that helps us when we have a sense of maturation, when we have a sense of inner authority, when we've overcome obstacles, we feel more secure in ourselves because we understand that we can face things and be okay, right? So that also goes along with getting confidence as well, that feeling of like, all right, I can deal with challenges. I can deal with obstacles. I know where I'm going. I have a vision and I know I can get there. Which takes me to patience and endurance. So Saturn, associated with time, teaches us patience because maybe something didn't come easy. We had to keep struggling through it. We had to press on, even though no one supported us, or we didn't have the resources that would have made the job a lot easier to get through. What it teaches us is that we can overcome, right? If we have patience to wait for the lemon tree to grow from a seed to the lemons, right? Without ripping it out and tearing it up and crossing our arms going, this is stupid, right? We'll get something positive from it. And Saturn is really, really great with that kind of energy. Again, long-term goals and planning. Saturn rules over Capricorn and also Aquarius. So we're looking at things that have structure that will withstand, things that can be a part of our legacy, right? And that could include children, that could include writing books or planting maybe a community garden, or even leaving recipes for future students or whomever to have, right? So that gives us this sense of, I want to have something that endures, that goes beyond me. I have a goal that I know I'm not going to be a champion Olympic skier in 2 hours, but I have a goal and I'm willing to put in the work. I'm willing to take the time and fall down the mountain a jillion times and get bruised and banged up and get up at 3 in the morning and all those kinds of things. I'm willing to do that because I have my eye on this goal and it's meaningful to me. So Saturn helps us also with those parts of our life, wherever they happen to be. Saturn, the benefits can also be achievement and recognition, right? When we've worked really hard for something, let's say it is that Olympic skiing championship or medal, I don't know, I'm not a skier, but something of that nature, and we actually get it, it feels really great, whether we get the recognition from other people or ourselves, or hopefully both, that we did it, right? We did this achievement. If we were trying to build a sculpture or start a business or learn something in a new educational course and we complete it, it feels really good most of the time, especially when it's in alignment with our own inner authority, right? So that can be really nice too, or we've worked really hard on something and we receive an unexpected award or something like that. That can be part of a Saturn transit too. So Saturn's not all the bad stuff. He kind of got stuck with all the bad stuff, but that's not really necessarily true. Okay, we're talking about discipline in terms of not punishment, but learning and teaching. Okay, so Saturn, again, associated with the great teacher in humanistic and evolutionary astrologies, we're talking about how do we grow, how do we learn, and possibly for some of us, how do we also give that back, right, in the world? We've talked a bit about structure and what that could look like, but we also need to talk about boundaries. For a long time, until the discovery of Uranus, Saturn was the boundary of the planets. It was the boundary of the known universe. With the structure of our human body, there's a boundary to my arm, right? It's important to have boundaries and to know where we end and something else begins. Boundaries of time, that's important too. If, let's say, you and a friend need to meet up or want to meet up for lunch, if you didn't set a boundary of time or a place, how would you know when and where to show up, right? So all of these things are actually quite important functions of Saturn. Saturn helps us with consistency, right? Can we replicate the same thing? Can we show up when the going gets tough? Can we keep on keeping on if there's something that's really important to us? Okay, can we see it through? Now, this one, in contrast to isolation and solitude, contemplative solitude. So this is when I think of the hermit's path, or someone who has chosen to perhaps go to a meditative center, an ashram or something of this nature for an extended period of time. They've withdrawn themselves from society for a purpose, for a choice that helps them to grow. And this may be a long-term choice or a short-term choice, but it's like, I'm going to go rent a cabin and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to finish my novel by myself without distractions, without cell phones, without computers or internet or whatever. Right. So that can also be Saturn is choosing that sense of separation or isolation because it's part of gaining your wisdom and your structure and achieving mastery in whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. Speaking of time, Saturn rules tradition, right? So I've talked about things that last, things that endure, things that stand the test of time. It's really kind of what tradition is in some way. So Saturn, and to some degree, all of the earth signs, but really in Capricorn too, we're looking at what do we have as traditions? What is traditional? What has been passed down through lineages and legacies? Cancer and Capricorn is the parental axis, right? What is it that you want to leave for others to find or receive, right? What do you want to keep going? Because if we don't have any tradition, we don't have any structure, which we've seen of lately, all of that being broken up. And that's part of the Saturn in Pisces and the Neptune in Pisces and the Pluto going through Capricorn and all this stuff that's been happening has been to break up a lot of the structures that are too crystallized, but also to ask us, what do we want to keep? What's important? Because if we have no structures and no traditions, we're just living in abject chaos. And that is not great either. So Saturn is the keeper of time. When we talk about time, we're usually referring to something linear, right? Although quantum time and quantum physics has changed all of that dramatically, but usually we're talking about our 3D incarnated in a body experience, which is linear, right? We are born, we are an infant, child, teenager, adult, elder, so on, right? So that aspect of Saturn is important because we need time to accomplish things. And we also only have so much time, right? None of us in this physical incarnation, right, is going to stay in this body forever. We have a limited amount here. And that's part of why Saturn is associated with death and the Grim Reaper, right? So even though he's the god of, in some mythologies, death, or standing on the threshold between this life and eternity, he also is associated with golden ages, okay? Because there are, particularly in the Roman mythology, although it could be showing up in other mythologies as well, because the Romans did borrow quite a bit of their mythology from the Greeks and the Sumerians, at least that we know of. But there was a time when Saturn came down to Earth and stopped time. And there was a great time of peace and abundance and longevity. And it was considered, again, this long period of golden time. Okay. So he's not always bad. He can be. Maybe not the best feeling most of the time, but not the worst either. Okay. It kind of goes both ways. And just to point this out quickly, Saturn associated with the ruler of the signs Capricorn, which is an earth sign. Okay, it's the 10th sign of the zodiac. It's the beginning of winter. It's a cardinal earth sign. I should have said that. It's the start of, cardinal initiates things. It's the start of winter. And then Aquarius as well, which Aquarius is fixed air. It's the apex of winter. Okay, it's the 11th sign of the zodiac. And again, a winter sign. So when we're talking about Saturn in general, again, I'll just briefly go over this because I've already mentioned it previously. I like to get ahead of myself sometimes. We have our natal Saturn placement is the work that you are called to over your lifetime. Now, work could, for some people, indicate something that they do for their job, right? Their job or their career or their vocation. It's possible that that is part of Saturn in your story. But Saturn is also what we need to work on, what we need to grow through. One of my teachers, Kai Pacha, used to say that Saturn in our chart represents what we didn't want to do in other lives. So we came into this one and it's like, okay, you have to buckle down and do Saturn. Okay. Saturn also shows us, again, because of its cyclical nature and how it shows up, repeating patterns and repeating tests that we are going to be confronted with over and over again until we learn them. It's not the only planet, but it's a pretty big one. It's a pretty solid sense of like, are we growing and maturing in this area that we feel lack or we have lack? It could be an actual thing, like perhaps we experience a time period when we're young of not having good health, right? But we work on it, we work through it and get better later. I have a number of people that I know with very strong Capricorn and Aquarius in their charts that has been part of their journey for them. But now they're doing great because they had to work through all of the health issues that they had, and they lacked really a lot of time in development in certain areas. And so now they're kind of making up for it and having a great time. Actually, they're doing wonderfully. So Saturn in our natal chart also represents where we may, I may need lack boundaries. Oops, it's what we may need to create boundaries where we may lack them, okay, and or structure. So looking at that, again, Saturn changes things over time. So we may find ourselves, again, maybe early life, growing up with no structure or too much structure in our life. And how does that change and help us when we're growing or inhibit us when we're going through life, when we're growing, when we're maturing? What does that look like? Where do we need to develop those kinds of things? Again, as I've been talking about, Saturn is where you begin with lack. It's where you're the newbie, where you're, if you wanted to be a great dancer, but you have 2 left feet, right? It's where we may feel afraid. It's where we may feel like we're not enough, we're not good enough, or we may be getting those messages early on in life. You'll never do this. You'll never accomplish this. So that may actually have been part of our experience as well. Sometimes it's more internal and not so much external. Sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes it's both. Just depends, again, on your natal Saturn placement. So when we engage with it, when we work on it, especially if, let's go back to the fear of speaking, maybe with Saturn, fear of speaking up for yourself. The more you can practice it, and it won't be easy, especially at first, the better it'll be. And the more you'll gain confidence and mastery. And again, maybe it's part of your journey to help other people do the same, or at least, I mean, not as like a profession, but, you know, you find someone later in life and they're really struggling with something. You're like, oh, actually, I've got a little insight on that. And it helps the person. That's great, right? That's that Saturn legacy principle where we can pass things on to other people, hopefully in a positive way. So when we're talking about transiting Saturn, we're talking about where we need to put in extra work, okay, for the next 2 to 3 years, depending on how long Saturn is going to be in that particular sign, whether or not it's retrograding into the sign before or not, just depends. Coming up for Saturn in Aries, we will have a retrograde period where Saturn goes back into Pisces and then moves forward and on into Aries. So that will be a more brief period of time. For example, many of you won't have Saturn in Aries in your natal chart, right? But for the next couple of years, you're being called to put in the work, to roll up your sleeves and get in there with the Aries part of your chart. Okay, that's going to be important for you to more or less degree, but that's where you're going to run up against some stumbling blocks. Okay. So this also could be an area where you need to create more boundaries or more structure. Okay, we've seen that especially with Pisces, where everything was kind of dissolving and it was just getting very Neptunian. And what was the nature of reality? And it felt like a large part of the population was losing its mind and things were happening. It's like, is this reality? Saturn came in and actually was helping with that and helping us kind of confront like, okay, we need to get things back together. Okay, great Neptune, love all the dissolving you're doing, but we need to start getting our ish in gear, getting our poop in a group, okay? And actually structuring our visions or our things that we want to accomplish and leaving behind the things that are just fantasy and that maybe need to be left as fantasy. I'll just leave it at that. So going to one of the more positive aspects of Saturn, you may, during a Saturn transit, actually receive way more recognition and maybe less about having to create more boundaries or less about feeling the lack and the awkwardness and the delays. It may actually be where your previous efforts, your lemon tree finally has lemons on it. And you're like, yes, this is great. Okay. And this could also, represent a time period that represent your golden years. Because remember, Saturn can represent golden ages as well. Okay. Or it could refer to your older years if you're older in life, like the Golden Girls. I still love that show. Sorry, my dog is coming in here to say hi. She may pop up. We'll see. All the animals love to say hi when I get on to do astrology videos on YouTube or readings and sessions. So, all right, here we go. So reflecting on Saturn, has it felt like Saturn is a strong presence in your life, right? Or does it feel like it's something that maybe you only occasionally come up against? Okay, how do you relate to inner and outer boundaries? What has that been like for you? Is that something that's actually pretty, like you're pretty good with, pretty easy? Or has that been like, oh my gosh, like I'm struggle busting in on that one. Okay, or maybe both. Right? Sometimes it just depends on the subject we're talking about. We can be great in one area and like, woo, severely lacking in another. And that's okay. What's your relationship like to inner and outer authority? How do you deal with that? Again, Saturn can show us where early in life we may have had a lack of help in that area. And as we grow, something that we may need to incorporate a lot more of. Sometimes it could be less. Maybe you're too controlling. Oops. Yeah. So maybe it's been that, wow, I actually during Saturn and Pisces have learned that I need to let go of micromanaging and over holding on to everything or pointing out everyone else's flaws and start chilling out and letting go. Okay. Stepping back. Where have you felt lack or hardship previously? And how have you come through it or not? It's always an interesting thing to look at, especially if Saturn is hitting our chart hard and we feel like we are so tired of, trying to dig through a concrete wall with cotton candy. It's like, this is not working. But eventually we figure it out. We figure like, oh, actually the cotton candy is not going to work. Let's use something else. We try something else, or we find a way around the wall because we had to be more inventive or go outside of our comfort zone. Right. So kind of looking at that is always good. Usually figuring out, well, how did I do well? Because there's always going to be things that you did well, obstacles that you overcame and it was positive, and ones where maybe it didn't go so well. That's okay. What comes up for you when you think about keywords for Saturn, like hard work, like fear, like delays, such like that? How are you with that? Some people are like, all right, I'm good, I'm comfortable. And some people are like, oh, no, never, right? And that's part of what makes us beautiful humans, because we need variety. We need both. All right. So Pisces, just briefly on Pisces. When we're talking about Pisces, we are talking about all the lessons and the growth that we have gained from the previous 11 signs. So in tropical Western astrology, which is the type of astrology that I practice as well, it's the one with the round wheel, right? Spring is the start of the year, right? And we end the year in winter with Pisces. Different than the calendar year, whole other story. But that's what it looks like. And so the idea is that we take, in a sense, a journey from Aries, starting out all the way through the zodiac, and we end up at Pisces, where we've hopefully, again, gained a lot of wisdom, especially going through Capricorn and Aquarius, right? The wisdom signs there. And Pisces is where we are asked to go from that singular entity from 1 to 12, right? And so now we're being invited to reconnect with the cosmic forces, with metaphysics, with our intuition, our creative side, our sensitive side, our collective side, where we realize that we are the drop in the ocean and also the ocean in a drop. Right? It's that the Aries Pisces border for me is that dichotomy from Rumi, from that famous poem of his. And I believe if his chart is accurate, which it may not be, he has, what was it, Neptune in Aries? I think he had Neptune in Aries. Anyway, getting sidetracked. So when we're talking about Pisces and the symbol of the fish, and I wish this had a string here, usually there's a fish, two fish swimming in opposite directions tied by a string, because really, even though we may be going through separate experiences, we're going different ways, it seems like we're polarized, we are actually all connected as well. right? So Pisces, two ruling planets. Jupiter is the traditional planet and Neptune is the modern planet. So I'll do a separate video on Saturn and Neptune together because that's going to be a big deal. I already did a quick video on describing outer planets' transition from earth and water to fire and air, which I'll link below. So when we've had Neptune and Pisces, we have had lots of Pisces, like Pisces, massive energy in the collective since 2011. That's why there's been such a rise in spirituality, meditation, wanting to connect, kind of the fall of the matrix, right? Realizing that we know very little about the nature of reality and all the quantum things that, again, have been around for a long time, but they've really kind of gained this hugeness, this fullness, this permeation through the collective. Okay. Pisces, again, is the 12th and final sign of the zodiac and represents the end of winter. It's mutable water, meaning we're getting ready to change seasons. So mutability is about change and variability, right? And then water, our intuition, our creative side, our emotional side, where we flow, okay? So looking at the benefits and challenges of Pisces, just quickly, Pisces benefits can be sensitivity, right? And nuance and innocence. Where we have Pisces in our chart is where we may find a connection to our intuition, or again, I use the term metaphysics. You could use psychic phenomena as well, if that's something that you like. I like things that are beyond physics. It kind of works better for me. It's where we can find a spiritual connection. The other Jupiter ruled sign, Sagittarius, also, but Sagittarius tends to be a little bit more in like theology and religion sense, or symbology. There's a lot about symbols there as well. So you can also find that with Sagittarius, but Pisces, we're really finding this surrender and this devotion. What do I want to devote myself to? It's a really interesting question, right? So in that Pisces area of your chart, you may also find yourself being altruistic or charitable. Pisces on the service axis of polarity with Virgo represents, what do we share? What do we, in a sense, give away? Where do we volunteer? Okay. And of course, that has this challenging side as well, which we'll get to in a moment, but that's what we're looking for. Helping someone, out on maybe the side of the road, or giving someone directions, or having, extra lunch and your coworker forgot theirs and you share yours, that kind of thing. It can be really anything. Okay. Pisces also represents, for those of us that are inclined, right, music and art and poetry and things that are fantastical. Represents, I didn't put this on here, but it also has to do with theater and the movies, right? Because when we're watching a theater production or we're watching a movie, we're not actually watching something that's real, right? It's an image, it's an illusion of something that's real, but it's not actually happening, even though it kind of is, but not really, right? So it's also where we are creative, and creativity can mean many, many things. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're creative with a paintbrush, right? And you can make great works of art. It could be any type of creation act, okay? This is where we channel energy, where we get these ideas and we're like, wow, like let's say you are inclined to paint and you sit down and you're staring at a blank canvas and you just start to stroke, and all of a sudden you don't know what you're going to paint, but it comes through you, okay? That's part of where the channeling comes through with Pisces. And yes, it could be channeling in a sense of mediumship, but it's also all of our abilities to channel. We don't know where it comes from, but if you are an artist of any type, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is something outside or inside of us, whatever it is, beyond our physical boundaries that informs itself through us and expresses through us. Okay. And that's very much when we see strong Pisces in someone's chart, we can see potentially those types of abilities. Pisces can be wistful, it can be yearning, it can be romantic, right? It's like, oh, and you know what? That's great. Like we really do need all of those kinds of places, whether or not it's a big part of our life experience. It is nice to have this, like, wow, that'd be really great if, oh, I'd really enjoy that. Wouldn't that be amazing? It's really important part of our psyche. Okay, Pisces is also concerned with the collective and with unity. Okay, it's kind of like, can't we all just get along? Can't we all just stop fighting? Can't we all just be peaceful? What if we just didn't have boundaries or borders? What if there was nothing like that? Well, good and not good, right? But at least on the beneficial axis, it's realizing that there's a whole world out there and that we are part of that and we are connected to it. And maybe we can interact with, and world could be global. It could be, outside of where we grew up. Okay. So it really could be on any kind of nuanced scale. Nowadays, it feels like everything has to be global, right? Because of how connected we are. Again, that's challenging and not challenging. And then Pisces is also where we can experience transcendence, right? Where we can, again, if you're an artist or a musician or something, or any place where perhaps it's neither of those things. Maybe you just like to go swimming and all of a sudden you're transcended beyond just your small self and you have these ability to reach into the beyond, to meditate, to envision. All of those kinds of things can be transcendent experiences. We're talking about challenges. We're talking about being overly sensitive, right? Like everything hurts you. If someone said, "Oh gosh, Nicole, that blue shirt is nice," you're like, "I don't know, maybe," right? And you just burst into tears for any reason, or everything hurts your feelings, right? Or we see a leaf fall from a tree and you start crying. It's like, ooh, that can be really challenging. Now, there could also be other things going on, of course, but sometimes we can get stuck in being overly sensitive or overly emotional for a variety of reasons, right? We can be with Pisces, sometimes it represents where we're highly vulnerable. Okay, Pisces is very porous. Again, that boundarylessness that we have with Saturn is totally washed away with Pisces. And we're very floaty and ethereal and ephemeral, right? So that can lead us to becoming sometimes overly overwhelmed or even unstable. Right? We don't maybe have a solid foundation under us when we have a lot of either Pisces in our chart, or we're experiencing quite a strong Pisces energy. Like, for example, Neptune and Pisces, that has been a whole huge injection of Pisces. Okay, and it's created quite a bit of instability, but it's with other things as well. So Pisces can also be where we feel eternally victimized, right? Again, Pisces, Virgo, the service axis, but it can also turn into kind of the martyrs and victims axis as well. It's maybe where we're too self-sacrificing. We're overly generous. Maybe we're just like, everyone just always takes advantage of me, but we're offering ourselves up instead of taking a moment and saying, can I actually give this right now? Right. That's just one example. Or people that, or this could be you, this could be maybe a time in your life where it felt like everything was wrong and it was everyone's fault and just wasn't fair. And how dare this? And everyone owes me, or this person owes me, this kind of thing. Fine to experience in a short term, right? Because that's part of humanity, right? It's just part of our experience. We're probably going to come up with trauma that does leave us victimized in some way, to some degree, whether that's small or big, it really doesn't matter as much as just the point itself. But when we get stuck in victimhood, that's a whole different energy. And that's been very pervasive as well since 2011, just growing and increasing as Neptune is getting towards the end. Right? When a planet gets to the end of a sign, especially a slow moving planet, like the outer planets, it's like listening to like a symphony where it starts really slow, kind of at first, and then it builds and builds and builds, and it's this giant cacophony of sound by the end. That's kind of what happens with the planetary energies too. So Pisces is also where we can be vulnerable to anything, really, to manipulation, to seduction. We can be used, abused, duped. Because again, we may not have a strong enough boundary in that area to realize that that's happening. And it's kind of prime takings for predators, right? Predatory actions. Because Pisces can be so boundaryless or overly porous, that can affect us in a number of ways, emotionally, psychically, spiritually, physically. All of those kinds of things can come into play here, but sometimes it also, because Pisces wants to transcend, it wants to go back to the one, maybe it does feel so boundaryless or overly porous that it may not want to be in a physical body. And that can be anything from just wanting to sit and meditate all day and not really take care of the self, eat properly, move the body, participate in acts of hygiene, things like that. Those are all very Virgo things, but it can also symbolize not actually just wanting to be here in general, not wanting to be alive. And that's been a really challenging energy, I think, as well, for many people in the collective, is this sense of like, I just can't be in physical reality incarnated anymore. Oh, my puppy here just wants to say, hi, sweetie. Sorry, if you see the camera moving, she is knocking my hand. She really wants me to pet her. Okay. So Saturn and Pisces. So putting together Saturn, when we talk about Saturn or any planet in a sign, we're talking about the action. The planet represents the action, the what is happening, and the sign tells us how it's happening, or the lens through which it's happening. Okay. So Saturn and Pisces has been saying to us, let's have an honest confrontation with things like the nature of reality versus illusion. That's a huge topic. If you have been in the spiritual community at all, you know that has been a tremendously pervasive topic. And it's kind of coming, I think, to its maturation. That's the word I was looking for, with Saturn coming to the end of Pisces. Neptune really opened the doors, and Saturn has brought it to maturation. Actually, yeah, it has. Anyway, I'll cut that out. We're also talking about letting go of escapism, right? Letting go of maybe where we have addictions or places where, again, we don't want to face reality, right? It's also going to ask us to let go of victimhood, right? That's not the same thing as receiving trauma or being the victim of something. It's when we take that on and it becomes our identity that it can be really disastrous for us. Okay. So Saturn's going to come along and say, got to let that go, especially in Pisces, got to let that go. Okay. It's also talking about letting go, talking about the need for accountability and maturity. Accountability has been kind of a dirty word for the past, 14-ish years. And Saturn came along the last couple of years and was like, nah, nope, got to step up. If you got yourself into this position, let's figure out how you can take actionable steps for yourself to get yourself to a better place. Right. What dreams can be structured, right? And what are just fantasy? So it has been really lovely to have this really rich time of being visionary and being like, wow, what if? And oh, it'd be so nice if, or how about this? But we really at a certain point need to go, okay, what's the practicality of this? Is this something that I can take actionable steps to move forward with, or do I need to let it go? Right? Like, I'm in my 40s now. Am I going to go back to preschool and be a toddler all over again? No. Right? It might be nice to think about. Not that I think about that, but it's not going to happen, right? Let that go. Maybe write a children's book, right? Or something like that. Okay. And actually sit down and do it. So Saturn here coming into Pisces, also showing us like, where have we been in denial? And that's not a fun thing to look at, right? And any of us can fall into denial about any kind of topic. Maybe we've been in denial about our day-to-day routine, or maybe we're in denial about a relationship that we're in that we know it's not really working. Maybe it's not bad, it's not great, but we're kind of just like in this limbo feeling, because that's a lot of what's felt like the last few years, is like we've kind of been like the image I chose, that girl just falling through the clouds and air, but there's like nothing below, nothing above. It's just kind of like, what? We're in this space of being held in a position, but we're not really making progress. Okay, Saturn's coming through, especially as it's going to go into Aries and give us a little preview of like, all right, time to take some action here. All right, it's going to retrograde, go back into Pisces and say, all right, what do we need to clean up here? What are we still in denial about here? And again, it could be anything. It could be your job, could be your health, could be family topics, finances. Just depends on where this is in your chart and where you have your natal Saturn as well. Okay, because the transits are always referencing where our natal Saturn is in some way. Okay, so Saturn and Pisces asking us for spiritual and material integration. Okay, we need material things. We are in a 3D, third density, right? Dimensional space, but we can't lose our connection to something outside of ourselves, right? To source, to God, to the field, whatever it is that you call it. We need both. And in my opinion, we have gotten moved away from a lot of spirituality into a very material time. It's about building structures, getting money, having a great body, having 10 cars, having a showcase of kids or whatever. And I know I'm speaking for the Western perspective, but that is the one that I'm living. And I don't want to speak for other cultures whose experience I have not had and have no business talking about. So looking at all of that and going, yeah, but what is our soul longing for? Is this helping society? Can I share this? Is this, we talk a lot about alignment. Is this in alignment with who I am? And again, the opposite, am I so concerned with being spiritual and being virtuous and having my head in the clouds or the stars or whatever it is, that I'm not attending to material needs, right? So we need both to be integrated. We live in a physical body, it needs food, it needs water, it needs movement. Okay, we need some other people. And we need source, we need spirit and creativity and sensitivity and all those other things that come along. It's not either or, it's and. That's really what Saturn's been showing us, is we need that and. Okay, connect those Lego bricks together. Cultivating compassionate and mature boundaries. Again, Saturn really showing, especially since 2008, we've had a lot of Saturn, a lot of Saturn times. I talked about that in Pluto and Aquarius as well, because Saturn also rules Aquarius. So we have a tremendous amount of Saturn running in the background energy. Okay, and we will for quite some time, about another 20 years or so. Okay. Where do we need to mature? Saturn's been showing us where we are immature, right? Where we do not have a strong sense of self or maturity or accountability, where we're dropping the ball on things that we know we shouldn't be, where we're overly burdening ourselves or overwhelming ourselves, really coming to the end of the zodiac and Pisces and going, all right, we come to kind of the end of the road here. So where do we need to get it together? Okay. Navigating unyielding heaviness and sense of melancholy. This has been hard. I talked a little bit about in my video on the transition from earth and water to fire and air. When it comes to Neptune, part of what's happened, and this also has to do with Pluto and Capricorn as well, there's a number of things. There's never just one singular thing. It's always the overall principles of multiple energies coming in and giving a theme. That's the word I was looking for, is the theme. We've had this strong theme of things falling apart, looking at generational trauma, which also has to do with Pisces in the 12th house. All the water houses in your charts have to do with some way or another what's inherited. Okay. And really having to confront those things, seeing it fall apart, seeing it change, but also seeing it heal. Looking at the structure of the world that is changing dramatically, and it's going to continue to change. This isn't, something that's just, oof, gone, bye, okay, we can just move on now. We have several more years, if not decades, of tremendous change on this planet in the way that we do life. And so with Saturn here, it's trying to teach us how to be resilient and mature through that and create new structures that will be better in the long run. But it can feel so overwhelmingly heavy. Right? Remember, Saturn is lead. With that Neptune as well, the nihilism that has been going on, the dystopian feelings, the feelings of futility. I know that's one I've struggled with for the last couple of years. It's like, my God, it just feels like, especially in that suspension time we've been in, where it's like a lot of things are crumbling. And yes, we're figuring out the new, right? Pluto and Aquarius giving us new. Of course, the other planets are moving, giving us new. It's like we can see the new, we're dreaming the new, but it's not quite here yet. And it can be a frustrating place to be. And it can feel like, oh, it's never going to change, right? This illusory, strange limbo feeling isn't going to change. Well, it will, because we're just not quite through it yet. Okay. And then with all of those things come the feelings of loss and despair and grief and nostalgia, right? It was so much better when. Well, yes and no, right? We've been going through a collective fog, this sense of like, what is real? What is not real? You can look around and see people seem kind of disconnected. A lot of people, not everyone, a lot of people have become way more connected, the people that have been doing the work. And it's also perhaps their time, their natural time to be doing this kind of work, feel more connected. But a lot of people feel very disconnected. And that's been incredibly difficult as well. And that's part of what we'll be changing and cultivating going forward with the change to fire and air. Is air is very social, right? Fire is also social. Okay, so that's going to change things too. It's coming. The change is coming. And I will talk about this in a second, separate video, but we're going through a karmic completion time. Saturn goes around approximately every 30 years. So the last time we had Saturn in Pisces was the mid-90s, if that's a point of reference for you. And then we're also closing out with Neptune, a 165-year cycle at the same, simultaneously, right? Same year, essentially, going on. We're in the transition period between the age of Pisces, which is about a 2000-ish, 2100-ish year cycle, and the age of Aquarius. Those are very long cycles. It has to do with the precession of the equinox, which is not the same thing as the planets orbiting our sun. Okay, they're different things. Maybe I'll do a video on that one of these days, but they're not the same thing. Okay, and there's a possibility that we're also with Neptune and Aries meeting with Saturn and Aries at 0 degrees, which is happening in 2026, that we are closing out potentially a 12,000 year karmic cycle. All of these things are happening, layering on top of one another. And it is a lot to handle. It's a lot. We can talk about feeling overburdened, right? It's like, oh my gosh, so many changes, too many changes, but exciting also. All right. So what do we do with Saturn and Pisces? Well, hopefully we can look at in what areas of my life have I learned to balance emotional sensitivity with the need for grounded responsibility, right? I need time for my meditation, and it's important that I eat nutritious food. Okay. I can be very sensitive to another person's or countries or groups or animals, whatever it is, needs, and I can have a little bit of space from them as well. I can not take that on in a way where it's causing further damage to them and to me. Okay. How do I respond when I feel emotionally overwhelmed? Do I have defined, disciplined, and healthy coping structures, or do I escape into fantasy, victimhood, or avoidance? Right? And any of us can do it. Where in my life am I being asked to turn my visions and dreams into practical, tangible realities? And this is part of when Saturn came in 2023, going, all right, let's get our poop in a group. Let's dream some new dreams. Let's get some new visions, and let's start giving them some form and structure. It's going to be hard because it's Pisces and Neptune is there. Still going to be a little challenging in Aries, but we have to at least start creating the new, right? And leaving behind what's not going to happen. How has my spiritual or artistic side become more integrated or defined? Do I have a consistent connection or practice? This is going to be important going forward, especially because we have so much of the fire and air. Fire has to do with intuition as well, and enthusiasm and things of that nature. And we need to stay connected to our emotions. Air can be quite logical. All right. So we kind of have this like zeal and zest and exuberance and logic and structure and just really wanting to talk and move things around. But we also need to take from the prolonged period. If you remember the slide that I showed at the beginning with the outer planets, it was that really terrible graph that I did, the like Excel spreadsheet. We need to keep the grounding work and the emotional work that we've done over the past several years so that we have that already in our bag so that we can express and share and be excited and move forward. We need all of those things kind of already laid in. We've been laying the groundwork because we have so much new stuff to do. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. All right, and lastly, where in my life have I struggled with grief from endings, loss, or separation? Have I developed healthy structures to help me better cope with life's emotional challenges? Okay, and if you haven't, it's not too late. Okay, just because Saturn moves into Aries doesn't mean that you can't do that. In fact, it might be a little bit easier to do it in Aries. Maybe the Pisces part for you was more about the dismantling and the processing the grief that you may have. And in Aries, it's going to be like, all right, now I can actually create steps and systems to move forward. Okay, so don't feel like you can't ever do something that's really important to you. All right, Aries. When we are talking about Aries, it's the first sign of the zodiac. It's the beginning of spring, okay, in the Northern Hemisphere anyway. And we're talking about springing forth, right, from the depths of winter. This is a yearly reminder that we can begin again. So it's part of why Aries represents in humanistic and evolutionary astrology new beginnings, fresh starts, right? We are talking about Aries, who is out on the front lines. It's launching forward. Everyone else is way behind. Who knows where they are? Aries goes forward and doesn't worry about if anyone's following them or not, right? They're pioneering new territory. They're going into the unknown. Okay, and that's why Aries insists on being first. It's got to do that. It's part of its nature. Okay, Aries is a huge leap. Some of the signs are a little bit closer in how they express themselves, although each sign is quite different from the one that precedes and follows it. From Pisces to Aries is a big shift. Okay, it's from the collective oneness and calmness and emotional waters and this kind of boundaryless, beautiful, mystical existence to bam, Aries, shooting down the cannon, already gone. Let's get it moving, right? It's like, wow, that's a huge difference. So Aries is very much from the collective, the 12, back to the one. It's about being an individual. It's about being assertive. It's about being self-oriented. And that's why Aries gets labeled as selfish. Well, it's actually, in a lot of ways, supposed to be. Now, it will grow and develop and mature with Libra as well, but Aries is supposed to be self-focused. Taurus as well. Aries and Taurus are the most self-focused of the signs out of all the 12. So Aries is a symbol of the ram, right? And rams, especially young male rams, when we watch them, when they're going through for their dominance or working things out and whatever it is they do, they run into stuff. They run into each other and just it's incredible to watch, especially in slow motion, right? So Aries, it's the part of our chart, and if we have any planets there, it'll also be more pronounced, is where we are being asked to go head first into something. Rick Levine, the astrologer, always says, shoot first, aim later, right? I have so many amazing, beautiful Aries friends in my life, and they always have this saying, to some degree or another, like, just do it and then ask for permission. Just go do it. Ask for permission later. It's amazing. I love Aries so much. I get so much out of them. They're just fabulous. So Aries is ruled by Mars. Mars is where we need to take action, what we're passionate about, what drives us. Okay, it's a really important piece in our chart. It's also what we are willing to fight for and defend. Okay, so that's Aries. Now we're going from Jupiter and Neptune to bam, the warrior archetype, Mars. Okay, big difference. Then we're talking about the first sign, we're talking about spring, we're talking about cardinal fire. So cardinal signs signal the beginning of a season. They initiate things and they tend to come at things with a bit of conflict. Okay, so the cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Yes, even Cancer and Libra have to confront things. right? So we're going to be finding ourselves in a whole different, this is not Kansas anymore. We are in a different world coming up. The benefits and challenges of Aries. And the benefits is the warrior archetype. And we're talking with Neptune there as well. And I'll talk about this more in another video. It's the sacred warrior. Okay. It's not, which would be the challenging side, this dominating, brutish, brutal, bloodthirsty. That's the shadow side of Aries. But really the warrior archetype in all of us that can stand up for our principles, stand up for ourselves, take up space, say, I really want to accomplish this. This is my passion and my drive, and having the will to fight for it, especially if people, maybe around you are poo-pooing you and going, oh, that'll never work. Oh, you're at it again. Oh, okay. Aries needs to have an internal strength of will and healthy ego to be able to say, I want this and I'm going to go for it. Okay. We all have Aries somewhere in our chart. It's where we're being asked to assert ourselves, right? To overcome things through struggle. And if you don't have a lot of fire in your chart, or you don't have strong Mars placements in your chart, this might feel really foreign to you. Like, let's say you've got a lot of Libra in your chart, or a lot of Taurus, those are the Venusian signs. This might feel very foreign. I can't fight for this. Like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean assert myself? That might be something that's really challenging. We're coming up on needing to learn how to do that. Okay. Aries, as I mentioned a little bit ago, they're really contagious. They have this contagious courage and joy for life that can inspire other people. Like, I truly love my Aries friends. They are so helpful to me. I have quite a Venusian chart, and oh my gosh, it's so nice for me, learn how to butt heads with someone, and it's okay, and we can repair later, right? That's the Libra side. Okay, we can negotiate, we can piece this out, we can work this out. But it's so lovely to have people on your team that are like, just go for it. You can do this. And it's like, oh, yeah. And they're usually right, too. They've got a real good track record in my life of being right. And I really appreciate Aries. So to all the Aries out there, I love you. You're amazing. Thank you for inspiring us. Because they have a lot of enthusiasm. All the fire signs are enthusiastic. Right? When we're talking about Aries, Aries really doesn't stay down for long. They get knocked down, they get back up, and they keep going. That's part of that cardinality. Got to start again. Got to start again. All right. Been knocked down 7 times. I'm going to get up an 8th. With Saturn coming in there, that may be a theme that many of us have to deal with. So be good to develop. Aries has zeal for discovering new things, right? New territory, new ways of doing something, new ideas. They like pioneering and they like being first. Okay, so if you have strong Aries in your chart, or one of your angles is an Aries, perhaps, this is where you may be the first to do something, the first in your family, the first on your street, the first man or woman, or however you identify to do something, right? You may come up with ingenious solutions. Aries can be really, really ingenious because they're so intuitive and they're so quick and they're so on the spot and they're so present that wherever this is in your chart, you can tap into that energy too. Maybe easier, maybe harder, but you can do that. Speaking of doing, Aries tends to have this identity or this part of themselves that feels like doing is being. Like, I got to do something. I've mentioned in other videos that a restless Aries, oi. Again, with a lot of my Aries friends, sometimes they want to stir up trouble, right? That warrior archetype that doesn't have anything to do. They want to stir stuff up. And my question will be back to them like, are you bored? Do you have something to do? What's going on? And usually like, yeah, okay. They need to move their energy. They need to be doing something. Okay. Especially if they're starting to feel frustrated or stuck. Okay. They need to be able to move the energy in a healthy, constructive way. Otherwise, challenging side of Aries and the challenging side of that Mars, right? Mars is the sword that cuts, right? It can be very destructive, it can be very dominating, brutal, has to overly assert itself, be very brusque or rude, right? Not considering other people. That's the Aries Libra axis, right? Self and other. Okay, they can have really immature egos. Everything's going to be my way or the highway, and it doesn't matter how many times I change it. right? They can kind of seem like tyrannical 2-year-olds, right? Mars has a 2-year cycle. It's kind of, if you think about the terrible twos, for those of you that makes sense, it's like, oh yeah. And any of us, again, can tap into that. But if you have more planets or transiting planets moving through that sign, we may be seeing people in the world that are acting like a bunch of toddlers. Not going to be fun. There we go. So, Aries, being spontaneous, having to go first, look or leap before you look, that kind of thing can be too much, right? It can be overly impulsive, it can be reckless with yourself or other people. And that's maybe not the best expression of Aries. It's kind of in that challenging side. On the flip, okay, we've been talking kind of too much Aries. So what happens if there's not enough of the Aries, if it's under functioning in a sense? Aries can lack drive, lack will, lack motivation, lack that spark and passion for life, right? A sad Aries is really sad. It's the fire has gone out, right? And it's just there. They can expect others to take charge or go first or do things for them. That's that Libra side, right? Is that kind of Venusian Mars that says, well, you just do it for me. Or I can't do this for myself, even though they're capable, right? And there could be fear there as well, or there could be trauma there. There could be very good reasons why this exists. And then it's even more important to go into the beneficial, the healthy side of Aries, start, moving the needle little by little over into taking small steps, doing something assertive, something that requires a little bit of courage. Maybe it's saying hi to a neighbor. It doesn't have to be, again, these huge things. You don't have to go base jumping off of the tallest building in Dubai, okay, just to prove that you're building your courage. It can be really small, okay? Aries, when it's under functioning, can be afraid to go after what it wants, to fight for what it wants, to stand up for itself, right? And the doing is being part, that's great, but Aries can also burn itself out. Doing too much, always going, shifting. It's too much. It's like, needs to pause. Okay, so again, learning for Aries, when it's time to go, and when it's time to back off for a little bit, regroup, regenerate, let that fire build back up and go again. Okay, so looking at Saturn here as the bridge, and we talked about Saturn symbolically as representing the threshold between worlds. If you're hearing that sound in the background, we have a parrot as well, and she is being very vocal right now. She's very excited about this. We're talking about this bridge, Saturn bridging Pisces and Aries, right? We're really in this threshold right now, 2025, 2026, moving from earth and water to fire and air, moving from the end of the zodiac to the beginning of the zodiac, moving from long traditions and ways of doing things that are no longer working, that have been breaking down, into not quite sure what they're going to be yet, but we're going to create and pioneer and forge new paths and new territory. Okay. So hopefully we have taken the wisdom from the Pisces phase, what we've learned there, what we've envisioned, worked on our spiritual selves, released our generational trauma, done our grieving, gotten back in touch with our spiritual side, whatever it is, so that we can take all that forward, right? So that we can take it into a new phase of maturation. So we're talking about Saturn and Aries. We're talking about a very, very different energy from Saturn and Pisces. Okay, Saturn is now saying it's time to take responsibility for becoming yourself. And also it's time to just stop dreaming that dream, right? And it's time to actually do it, right? So on the way to doing that, Saturn in Aries is asking us to develop inner strength, sustained willpower, and endurance. Okay. It's asking us to develop self-confidence and taking action towards our visionary goals. Now, again, this might be easy for you. This might be challenging for you. Okay. It's asking us to be disciplined, to take mature action, to be undeterred by slower, frustrating starts. That is one thing with Aries can get, right? The fire can burn out. It can get easily frustrated and we're done. Okay. We're going to have to probably tend to that fire a little bit more. Maybe it's down to just like the last ember where we're going to have to tend that fire and get it back up to a reasonable flame. Okay. For many, 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 many of us out there, it is about rebuilding our identity. There has been so much dissolving, dissolution, breaking down. Again, it's not just one planet, it's multiple. It's Pluto, it's Neptune, it's Saturn, it's all of them. It's Uranus and Taurus. It's all of these things hitting us really hard, all simultaneously. For many of us, we've had a loss of where we thought life was going to go, what our trajectory was going to be, how our relationships were going to work, how our careers. I talked to so many people doing astrology readings that they spent a lifetime building their career and it was gone. And now they don't know what to do, right? Many of us have been dealing with that, particularly since 2020. That was just a huge, huge wrecking ball of a year. And in a lot of ways, we're still recovering from that in many different areas to different degrees. Okay. Some of us are way farther ahead and they're really going to be helping to pave the way. Some kind of in the middle, some are lagging, some are never going to wake up and they're just going to keep staying stuck in the dream of, yeah, but it's supposed to be this way that I want it. Might not be. Okay. The old ways of doing things, they're going. Whatever is going and gone, it's going and gone. That's just, it's not coming back. Okay. So we have to face that. So part of this rebuilding of identity and individuality is going to be taking integrated action. Again, all the things that Saturn's been asking us to integrate spiritually, maturity wise, materially, getting rid of what no longer serves us, letting go, surrendering, figuring it out. Now it's going to be time to like, okay, small steps. Doesn't have to be, again, base jumping off a tower in Dubai. Maybe it's just saying hi to your neighbor, doing something little by little, measured steps. Okay, consistently. That's Saturn. Consistent, small, measured steps. It's going to take us really far. Okay, because again, many of us need to, or are in the process of reclaiming our sovereignty and our agency, right? That's actually soul aligned. And that's a pretty lofty ask, but I think it's so important. And there's a lot of information on that. There's a lot of really great mentors and teachers on YouTube that you can look up if you're not quite sure what this is about. Again, a lot of people kind of waking up and realizing, oh my gosh, I've been living a life that I didn't even really want to live. I don't know who I am anymore. Those kinds of things. That's big. That's a lot. Existential crisis, really, really strong in the last few years. But the great news is we have a lot of opportunities, even if it doesn't seem like it, to rebuild. Okay. So we want to take action, again, that's built on structure and that's also well-timed. Okay. So if your dream is to build, I don't know, a house, right? Probably don't want to do it in the middle of monsoon season or a rainstorm, right? That's probably not the best time. Maybe wait till a dry season. Okay. That's going to work a lot better. Things like that. So Aries can be very impulsive, can be reckless. Saturn's going to come in here and say, whoa, 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 slow down. Not yet. Right. Or it's not time for action, or it's not time for anger. Right. So I love this image. I hope it doesn't offend anybody, but if it does, well, sorry. I love the image of that samurai in the snow that I found on Adobe Express. Whomever took it, I don't know. It's just on Adobe Express. But to me, it's that spiritual warrior, that wisdom that really comes through in the Eastern philosophies about responsible action, maybe taking no action, choosing peace, things like that, but knowing when to act, when to stand up, when to pull the sword out of its sheath and use it, right? With Saturn, again, there can be fear. Saturn can represent, Pluto is terror, kind of in a sense, like what we're terrified of. And Pluto is what we're afraid of. Or excuse me, Saturn is what we're afraid of. And they can seem really similar, right? But when we're talking about Saturn, we can be talking about fear surrounding newness, right? I'm afraid of what life's going to look like going forward. I'm afraid that I don't know. I can't control it. I'm afraid of asserting myself. I'm afraid of being someone new or becoming who I really am, because then maybe people won't like me or accept me. Maybe I'm afraid to take a risk. Maybe I'm afraid of failing, right? Maybe I'm afraid of defeat. I don't want that, right? I want to choose something that's more safe. Well, with Saturn and Aries, the ultimate balance is being able to have a little bit of safety and a little bit of risk. It's like that measured risk. Okay. And again, it's going to be easier for some, not as easy for others. And it's going to vary a lot between people. What seems like a huge leap for one person is going to seem like, a tiny step for another. Okay. So that's not about judgment. It's just about, this is an energy that we're going to be dealing with. We can also find ourselves lacking spark, lacking fire, we're like, oh man, it's supposed to be Aries, but it doesn't feel like Aries. Right? I still kind of feel a little unsure. I still feel a little like, can't really get myself out of bed. I don't really have like that enthusiasm. Get up and do the work anyway, right? Wherever Saturn is, do the work. Okay, so do the Aries work, even when, especially when you don't want to, because it will pay off. Okay, it will pay off at the end. That's the thing with Saturn. It always pays off. Okay. We can find ourselves having delayed starts. Like maybe we've been hoping to open a business for years and it was really hard. The pandemic hit and we couldn't because of that. And then everything's been a little funky and foggy and we keep trying and starting and we're like, can I finally get this thing off the ground? Okay. So there could be a lot of things going on there. Perhaps it's being delayed for another reason. Perhaps it's not great timing. Perhaps you just need to endure or change your position a little bit. Don't know. But can you manage the frustration, right? Or is it something that perhaps you need to either retool or give up entirely and go in a new direction? Okay, those are all possibilities, right? We can also find ourselves struggling with deep or profound frustration with authority, okay, authority figures. And again, that could be in a sense in our inner world. Maybe we're frustrated with ourselves in some way, or it could be outer, right? Sometimes when we have that inner disconnect, we look outside of ourselves and say, oh, it's this person, this group, this corporation, whatever it is, doing it to me, right? Maybe, maybe not. So just taking a look at that or wanting to really just kind of lash out. Sometimes it could be the other way around. Maybe we're receiving other people's aggression or frustration. And that usually indicates that something within us, we need to recheck in with our boundaries in some way. Usually there's some kind of Mars energy or there's a frustration within us that needs expression. Okay. And it's coming out through our boss or our neighbor or family member or our spouse, whatever. Okay. Reflection. Okay. So during Pisces, have you faced what dreams or hopes are practical and able to be carried forward versus what needed to be dissolved away and let go of? Okay. Are you willing to be the container in Aries for a new consciousness and creative force that is trying to be expressed through you? Remember, Saturn is about boundaries. We are a physical container for the expression of whatever it is that you call the divine. Okay. What's your relationship to assertion and drive? How do you work with that? Do you have what it takes to keep the spark alive when the going gets tough? What wisdom have you gained from the Pisces phase? And you can look back prior to this as well, that you can use to fuel your new way forward. Okay. Do you have faith and trust that you can take that fool's journey and make the leap? Okay. What structures do you have in place to help you through fear, doubt, and disillusionment? Because remember, Neptune's going to be there too. Neptune is the planet of disillusionment. Speaking of Neptune, we were talking about this Saturn and Aries co-presence, and really this started also with Saturn in Pisces, but I'm focusing on Saturn and Aries at this point. We are redefining reality, okay, in a big way. With Saturn and Aries, again, we're talking about the kickoff of a new 30-year cycle. With Neptune, we're talking about the kickoff of a new 165-year cycle. And next year, when they come together at 0 Aries, it's extremely rare. I can't find an ephemeris. I've mentioned this in other videos. If you know of an ephemeris or a way to calculate when the last time Saturn and Neptune was at 0 degrees Aries, let me know in the comments, because that would be amazing to look at. I've gone back 2,500 years. I can't find anything. Astrologer Pam Gregory, who is a wonderful astrologer, has said it's been 12,000 years. So that's possible. She's possibly, I would probably trust her. She's right. Although I don't know for sure, that could be wrong. But either way, we haven't had this alignment in more than 2,500 years. Saturn and Neptune meet up together, and they have met in Aries before, but not at 0 degrees. And 0 degrees is special because it's the beginning in astrology. It's the 0 point. It's the start. Aries is also the start. So we have the beginning of the beginning, the new, right? With these two outer planets, Saturn, the work we're called to do, our place in society, societal structures in general, okay, our legacy, that sort of thing. Neptune, how we connect to the divine, how we deal with illusion and disillusionment. Okay, really coming together hard and heavy over the next couple of years. Okay, people really want to know. I mean, I know I do too in some ways, but what's the new world going to be like? Honestly, we don't know because we haven't written it yet. And that's part of Aries, and that can be part of that Aries anxiety as well, is the like, oh my gosh, I'm leaping into the void and I don't know if there's anything to catch me. Okay, so if we're feeling that anxiety, it's appropriate. Whew, finally, don't be afraid of any transit if you can. Really, there's no need to be, especially from the humanistic and evolutionary astrology perspectives. Everything here is to help us, especially the blessings in disguise, especially the hard stuff too, right? Not just the good stuff, to grow, to expand, to be living more on purpose with purpose, to respond to life, because life is going to happen. It has its ups and downs, its twists and turns, and we are incarnated, whether you believe we chose to be here or not. We are alive right now during one of the biggest, craziest, most tumultuous, exciting, pioneering times in thousands of years. So there you go. Make the most of it, right? You don't have to let that overwhelm you either, but try not to be scared. Don't let YouTube astrologers or TikTok or whatever scare you. So not needed. All right. Much for watching all the way through. If you made it all the way through to the end of this video, I will be doing some more videos on Saturn in general and the outer planets and how their transits will affect your chart. I just wanted to get these out first. Let me know in the comments below what you thought, how you deal with Saturn, what you're thinking about all this shift from Pisces to Aries, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.